Hello. Welcome, everybody. And I hope that you're enjoying the kickoff of Orange Central Weekend. Yay! Go Orange! And I know we have a great mixture in here of both students, so future alums, as well as current alums. So we are beyond excited this year to host our alumna, Mary Spio, this weekend. Mary is the 2017, this year, Arents Award recipient for Excellence in Innovation. And you may not ever have heard of the Arents Awards. In fact, many of our faculty in our college haven't heard of it. Every year, 4 alums are chosen as winners who've attained really high excellence in career success. And we haven't had a winner in this college since the 1990s, which is why most engineers and computer scientists in our community haven't heard of it. So we are really thrilled not just to have a winner, but to have a winner like Mary. So Mary is the CEO and president of Seek VR Incorporated. It's a developer, the company's a developer of innovative virtual and augmented reality content solutions and experiences. Her companies have created content and technologies used by such global titans as Lucasfilm, Universal Music Group, Miami Children's Hospital, Microsoft Xbox, Tribune News, Clear Channel, and Boeing. And I think I heard of a few of those places. She's also a veteran of the U.S. Air Force. Mary holds several patents in real-time streaming and virtual reality technologies. And if that's not enough, she is an accomplished novelist and screenwriter. One of her books is A Song for Carmen, and she's the best-selling author of It's Not Rocket Science, 7 Game-Changing Traits for Achieving Uncommon Success. That's this one. I'm on page 77. It's really good so far. And we've actually been using this with some of our student groups, and there'll be a book signing after this. And so in this book, she shares inspirational stories to spur the readers to move beyond their comfort zones into creating impact and significance. She earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from SU in 1998 and a master's degree in electrical engineering and computer science from Georgia Tech. So I'm going to invite Mary to come and make some remarks, and then we'll open the floor to questions, followed by our book signing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, amazing introduction. I should take you everywhere. Right. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here today. Super excited to be back. It doesn't feel like it was that long, since I left this morning meeting with the Academic Excellence Workshop facilitators and just being around campus. It's so energizing. Super excited, to be back. One of the questions that I get a lot, people ask me, well, why did you write the book? How did you come up with the book? A few years back. Oh, sure. How is it now? Okay. A few years back, I got a call, which I thought was a prank. It was from the White House. I got a call asking me to call back, to the Department of State. And one of the things that they wanted me to do was work with them as a speaker on behalf of the United States, traveling the world, talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. So I got a chance to speak in places, like Pakistan. I was in China. I spoke to people in South Africa, Ukraine, Russia, all over the world. And one of the things that I realized is that no matter where I went, people were asking the same questions. And so I started to put together a lot of the questions and a lot of things that people were curious about, and that's how I came up with the book. And so the premise is not rocket science, comes from the fact that, oftentimes we tend to complicate, especially when it comes to technology, we tend to complicate, things. As engineers, we tend to complicate things. So I wanted to create a book that has a language really for looking at innovation, for rethinking innovation. And that's what the book is about. It's about, how do we rethink innovation? The number one question that I received was, how did you come up with these technologies? Because my first few patents were acquired by the Boeing company, and it was used to create the digital cinema technology, which allows the distribution of movies digitally globally, because before movies were delivered with reels. And so if you wanted to distribute globally to 30,000 theaters and 5 screens, so that's 150,000 screens, it could cost as much as $30 million, which was very expensive. So the movie industry had this major pain point that they wanted to solve with technology. And they came to the Boeing company because Boeing had, top-level security. And I was working then at Pan Amsat, working on delivery of content, primarily television content. And so Boeing said, well, we've read some of the papers that you've done about bandwidth efficient modulation and other things that can help solve this particular problem. So I was one of 3 engineers that they brought in, and also acquired a few patents from me, and we built what then became the Boeing digital cinema technology. And then we delivered movies. The first movie we delivered was Star Wars Episode 2, and then it became an industry standard. Worked with the movie industry to set the protocols and the standards. So today, it's interesting because I was at CES recently, and I went to speak to there was a decoder company that was there, and I went to speak to them, and the guy was like, oh, this thing uses the, a DC2 protocol, which is, it's very complicated. You wouldn't understand. And I was like, well, I developed that DC2 protocol, right, so it was like a full circle moment. But worked with the Society of Motion Picture and Technology Engineers to come up with the protocols to allow then the distribution of content. So that was the first, evolution of media. And then I also came up with an online video platform, which changed how radio delivers content. Media. So a lot of people will ask, well, how did you innovate with, one industry and then the next industry and then the next industry? And, my answer is always, very simple. It tends to come from a lot of the guiding principles that I received early on. I talk about, what I've done. There are, 3 things that kind of summarize that. One was really looking at innovation from the perspective of what can I contribute that can add value to what it is that I'm doing. What can I contribute that can add value? And a lot of times that contribution comes from something that other people are not seeing that you see clearly, and then the second one comes from the perspective of service. I share this story because I grew up I was born here in Syracuse. Well, my dad came to Syracuse. I was born here while my parents were here. And then we went back to Ghana where they were from, So there were some times where there was a period of unrest where the government had been overtaken by military rogues and soldiers running the streets. It was a very difficult time. And during that time, I would always ask him, why don't we just come back to America where things are much easier? And I will never forget an answer that he gave me this one time. He said that he had returned to Ghana because he wanted to help return the country to a democratic state. And then he said that, because in the final analysis, we will be defined by the problems that we solve and the problems that we create, and that the world is full of problems. And as long as you can find some really good ones to solve, you'll always be okay. Service was the cornerstone of his life, and it's also, and it served him well. It's also been how I innovate, service. So I love seeing the students and every single person is solving a problem. I've just chosen some really good problems to solve, and I've been very blessed to be, in the right places, solving the right problems. And that's what it's been about. It's been about finding some really good problems to solve. The movie industry had a pain point of piracy and, exorbitant distribution costs, so come up with a technology that solves that. And then, today I'm working in virtual reality. We're doing virtual reality content distribution. I went to meet with a lot of movie studios again and the record labels, because I know that whenever media evolves, there is a need
for content creators, particularly the labels and also the studios who lead this evolution to solve, figure out how to use that technology. And so I went and sat down with them and I said, well, what problems are you facing? And they did a chart and listed all the different problems that they're facing. And so I went back with my team and we solved that problem. And the problem they were facing with virtual reality was the fact that the devices that exist today tend to be very bulky, very complicated, and also because they're tethered, it's very difficult for everyday users of content to be able to, to use that, to consume content on a consistent basis. You have some VR devices, virtual reality devices that require room scale. We had an engineer who had to move because his house wasn't big enough to do room scale VR, which is unacceptable. So we went back and we created a simple foldable VR headset that then allows anyone to then try VR. This way they can make the decision if they want to continue to use VR. And then we also looked at different industries and said, where can we apply this? And one of the industries that, clearly needed the virtual reality technology was the healthcare industry. So we teamed up with some hospitals, and then before we knew it, there were so many other people coming out. For example, we have institution that we're working with now that said, look, we do a lot of tracheal intubations, which is a procedure that you cannot practice on a cadaver. You have to do it because the person has to be sitting down. The only way that our nurses and doctors can practice this is using virtual reality. And so then came up with a solution for that. And so it's just really looking at the particular pain points and seeing how we can be of service. Because innovation, no matter how cool a technology is, it's not innovative if it doesn't solve a problem for someone, if it doesn't add value to what someone is doing, because then it will be irrelevant to them, which has been the case with VR, for example. A lot of people felt before we came up with the foldable headset, a lot of people felt it wasn't relevant to them. And in fact, we had people tell us, well, we're not going to create content we weren't going to create content for it until you guys came along. So when you see a very simple foldable headset solution, people look at it and they don't realize the amount of technology behind it. And so the book goes into a lot of those, principles and how it applies to, making a difference, creating impact with, your technology, with your passion, and with everything that you do. So that's how I arrived as it's not rocket science, 7 game-changing traits for common success. So now I'm ready for some questions.
All right, questions. Who wants to open up the floor?
Yes.
As an SEO mom, what's the best advice you give to a freshman engineer?
The best advice that I would give to a freshman or to anyone, any student, is to stay abreast with what the industry is doing. That's one of the things that I did. From the time I was a freshman, I just had this natural curiosity about what was happening in the industry. So I always read, voraciously. I just read about on industry, websites, industry magazines, and so on. And I reached out to a lot of these different companies. So by the time I graduated, the people at Northrop Grumman knew what I was doing. The people at Boeing knew what I was doing. And I had established a rapport with them just based on understanding where the industry was going. So that's, one advice that I would give is keep your hands on the pulse of the industry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Talk about some of the obstacles that you may have faced and how you sought to overcome those?
Sure. So some of the obstacles, that I faced and how I overcame them, and I talk about this in the book also. In tech today, there is a major problem with gender equality, racial equality. That's just, something that's very known. For example, if you look at last year, of the 60 billion VC funds that went to innovations, only 2.4% of that went to women-led companies. That means only 2.4% of companies and innovations being created by women are getting funded. And that's a major problem because we're not contributing to the creation of the innovations of future civilizations. And there are so many of those stats that you can look at. And likewise, I had issues. I had challenges in that area. Because a lot of times, people wonder where, and then some people also believe that the reason why there's this disparity, it's because it's, that we don't have the ability or aptitude and so on, which is such nonsense, because if you look at, even in the 80s, almost 40% of the technical workforce, it was 37% were women. And we were moving towards equality in terms of in the tech world, and then just a lot of practices that exist today has kind of changed that. So some of those challenges were challenges that I faced as well. For example, I built my second company. We built it to 32 employees. We were working with Microsoft, Xbox, and Tribune News, and the list goes on, 200 radio stations. And so it was a time for us to grow. And I brought in an investor, and that investor believed that they would get a better valuation with a male than a female. And then they also believed that they didn't believe in having a black woman as the face of a tech company. And this is not even that far out. This is 2010. So these are some of the challenges that you would think would not exist, right? After building technologies that sold for billions for Boeing and others, you would think that I wouldn't face those same issues, but those are some of the issues. But those issues are also what continues to push me, and it's also helped me look at how I built my company differently. Because I didn't have the option of going that route, I focused on building these partnerships with different companies and focusing on their pain points and being a revenue-based company versus relying solely on investor dollars. This way we could chart our own course a whole lot more. And as a result, today we're working with Apple. We actually had deployment of we have a VR headset and the VR platform, and we're working with Apple, we're working with Universal Music. So we've become very, very disciplined in our approach and how we look at growth and innovation. But those are some of the problems, that I've had to deal with, and we've had to adjust accordingly. I was saying that when I first started out, I didn't really pay as much attention to things like the bylaws and other aspects of the business. I was so focused on building the technology that that wasn't something that I looked at. But when I was voted out of my own company by the board, now I'm like, I get an attorney that's looking at what the other attorney's writing, and I'm looking at that as well, and I can tell you every line in our bylaw, and so they say failure is a good teacher. I learned quite a bit from that process. So, yes.
Yeah, it is interesting that women face the disadvantages that you mentioned in the marketplace because women-led businesses tend to outperform male-led businesses. My question is, when you identify a problem to solve, how do you go about forming a team with the right skill set to solve that problem?
So basically, yeah, and thank you for adding that. Yes, I actually saw another article from Forbes saying that women-led businesses actually perform 3 times better than the S&P 500. So, and this is an active issue that a lot of people are rallying around. Yesterday I was at an event, the I Need to Be event. There were 18,000 women in technology that showed up. So that tells you that there is a movement around this, and there is a solution that we're all looking to bring to the marketplace. Once I identify a problem, I typically, because I have a very large network of people, I typically reach out to that network to see who within that network is able to bring what piece of the puzzle and then be able to solve it. And the network continues to grow. And having the opportunity of speaking in front of something like these 18,000 women that I spoke of in front of yesterday, as well as continuing to build relationships with the major companies, it then allows me to be able to get the message out, to find all the right people. And I find that there's so many amazing people looking to solve good problems, good fun problems, and so we've been able to attract a lot of great talent that way. Okay, yes.
Can you describe a bit of the good, the bad, and the otherwise when it comes to writing your patents, or writing them up, and then did you initially do it yourself, then a team, and then how much fun are patent attorneys?
Right. Are you a patent attorney?
No. I have patents myself.
Oh,
I'm very
okay.
small, and it was great until the attorney's like, too broad, too narrow.
Right.
You wanted this, but you didn't.
Right.
And you just keep, for me, it was keep writing.
Yes, and one of the, and thank you for bringing up the patents. The patents are the lifeblood of business today, because I don't know if you guys have heard, there've been a lot of IP battles recently. Facebook got sued by ZeniMax, after they acquired the Oculus for $2 billion, and I think they were fined something like $500 million. And there are additional patent infringements. There are quite a few VR companies that have gone out of business because they were really just copycat companies. And so today, IP is extremely important. What I do with my patents is, once I have the idea, I write it completely out, fill out the disclosure forms, but I'm working with a really good patent attorney. The advantage of my patent attorney is that he used to be patent examiner. So he understands the ins and outs of being able to file the patent. Early on, I was using the same, because after I left Boeing, since Boeing acquired 4 of my patents, I wanted to make sure that I did not have any conflict of interest. So I was using the same attorney that filed the Boeing patents, for me this way, because my first patents were on real-time streaming for satellite, alternate endings, and a few others. And then the next set, and then the current one that I have is was a patent examiner, and so he's been able to, for example, I have 4 additional patents in virtual reality technologies that have been issued. And one of the ways in which, I'm also able to get around the disparities that we have with the gender disparities is through the patents, because in terms of having a patented technology, people can't get around that. So the industry is forced to work with you. And they say if you can't get in through the door, breaking through the walls, that's basically what the patent does for you. For example, over the last few months, we've had a major company that's infringing on our patent, and the movie studios have reached out to us, and every single one of us have sat down with us, because they understand that they want to use the technology, the new technology that we have for virtual reality to distribute movies and music. They understand that they want to use the patent, and that we're about to infringe, and they found out that, okay, we have this patent, so they have to sit with us and talk. So, we're getting those meetings and sitting in there and having the discussion. So basically, what we've done now is you look at for movie distribution and also for music distribution. And the patent, one of the patents that we have is the ability it's a foldable VR headset which accompanies either a CD or a DVD, and it fits in line at retail. Actually, this is it. And it fits in line at retail, and it comes with a branded headset. So the patent that I filed for was for the surface ornamentation, which allows you to to brand it this way. So for movie studios and music labels wanting to distribute the content this way, we're the only company in the world that's authorized to do this. So then now, and I think that if we had the benefit of, infinite funds, such as some of the other privileged groups, then we wouldn't have been as disciplined in terms of saying, okay, we're going to wait, we're going to file the patent, we're going to make sure it's issued, and now we have a whole industry and a category that we've created, and now we're going to license it to, other people through that. But I can't tell you the importance of the patent, so thanks for bringing that up. Yes.
How's your level of productivity and just overall way of making change undergrad, grad school, and now?
I don't know if it's. Oh, she said, how has my level of productivity changed since undergrad and now? I don't think that. I think that while you're in school, right, you're typically on an individual path, but now I'm part of a team, and I'm part of an amazing team. Given the early challenges that I had, I've been very, very selective about the new team, and I can say that I love every single person that I'm working with now, and we have a great relationship. We have great investors now. We have an amazing team. So. In terms of my level of productivity, it hasn't really changed. I've always been very passion-driven. If I find something that I like, I'll just sit there until I figure it out, and that hasn't changed. I continue to love to learn, and so my level of productivity, the increase, the multiplier that I have today is because of the amazing team that I have. So that's, in a way, it's multiplied by the team. Yes.
Springboarding off that question, I'm curious about the role of writing a novel play in your career. I mean, why did you want to do this? How does it fit in with this? How did you make the time to do it?
Okay. So in terms of writing the novel, and I talk about this in my book too. I've always felt like I was a child of both worlds, the creative and also the technical. And I always wanted to find a way to kind of marry the two. So even though I started as a deep space scientist, doing orbital design for satellites, I gravitated towards entertainment technology because I wanted a way to bring the two together. So when I got the opportunity to work at Boeing Digital Cinema, at first I was working as a satellite engineer. But a moment came, I remember this one time when we were getting ready to show Star Wars to the creative team. And in terms of all the engineers, we were super excited because we looked at the technical data and everything was perfect. We had achieved pixel perfection, so we couldn't wait to show it to the creative team. But there were things that I felt creatively were not up to par. One of the things, for example, is because the signal was so perfect, you could see all the imperfections, and with part of the movie magic is being able to hide where the glue is and all of that stuff for like the horns on the characters. And so I kind of felt conflicted. I wanted to, say something, but then I would look at the data and everyone celebrating. And then the director walked in and he was like, "What have you done with my movie? This thing looks like crap." He used other words too, but I will use paraphrase, right? And so the engineering team was like, "Well, could you qualify what you mean by crap? Could you quantify that?" So as he's storming out, I happen to be the head of satellite communication also. So I sat with him to find out exactly what he didn't like about what he was seeing, and part of what he was seeing. As he began to describe it, I also began to translate that for the engineering team in terms of the contrast ratio, the thermal levels, this one, that one, so that we could build the team, we could build the tools for the creatives to be able to do what it is that they do. And I could sit and watch the movie 1,000 times. It takes a lot of popcorn, but I could do it. But I can, and I enjoy every minute of that. A lot of engineers were like, "No, we don't want to do, that's not what we want to do." And then much in the same way, the creative team didn't want to sit with the engineers for hours trying to figure out how to build those tools. So I had found a very unique place to be, and that was exactly where I needed to be. I say I'm not left brain or right brain, I'm whole brain, and so I lived in that whole brain lane, and that's where it comes from, so getting the chance to write the novel, getting the chance to write the book, it really feeds on my ability to live in the creative world, as well as creating the technologies to distribute the content. And it just also happened to be what the industry needed. So we built an online video platform, and we went to Coca-Cola and other brands and said, okay, now you can engage your audience with it. And they're like, well, but you got to create the content too, because the tech means nothing to us if you cannot, engage your audience with it. So there I came together with a full production house. So we created technology-enabled content. So for Coca-Cola, for example, we would capture all the content that, the artists that were performing. We even got a chance to do Super Bowl halftime show, all that. Capture that and then be able to distribute it. And it was at a very interesting time, because in order to develop, to distribute high-quality content, I have to understand, the streaming and, the quality of service for that content. But I also have to be able to have a good eye for what the production company is doing. And that's basically where I've lived, for a very long time. The same thing is what I'm doing now with virtual reality. I have to understand, the basic laws of Newtonian physics, because when you build virtual worlds, you have to build the worlds according to the laws of gravity. Otherwise, when people put these worlds on, they get sick. But those worlds also have to look beautiful and fantastic and magical and all of that. And that's where the creative side comes in. And, to create content for Lady Gaga and Justin Bieber and all the different artists that, we're creating content for now, it requires that, particular skill. So I'm not, a pure engineer, and I'm not a pure creative. I live here in the middle of the two worlds. And it's also what my uniqueness is, that I've been able to contribute, particularly to the worlds that that I've lived in. So that's where that comes from. Where I find the time to do everything, it took me at least 5 years to write the novel. So I write a little bit of it, and then, I put it away for a while, and I write a little bit of it. So it took me quite some time to write the novel. In terms of the book, that happened very quickly, because the time that I was kicked out of my company, I had to take some time out to figure out what I was going to do. And I looked at all the different opportunities that I had, and I got to travel with the Department of State. And, it was during that time that I wrote It's Not Rocket Science. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, Mary, I have a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Mary, I have a two-part question. Mm-hmm. The first is, when you were growing up, what was your trigger or triggers that prompted you to go into, to pursue education and career in technology? And then the second part of that is, what can everyone in this room do to encourage minority students, women, into the same career path that you took, especially in the city of Syracuse?
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I actually didn't know any engineers. So I didn't even know that engineering existed as a career path. I talk about the fact that when I came to the U.S., at first my dream, because I was growing up in Ghana, I remember seeing a documentary on the moon landing. And I was like, wow, this is really crazy. What would it feel like to walk on the moon? What would it feel like to actually be in the television? And it's what got me started thinking, asking, where is this place where mere mortals can walk on the moon? Where is this place? And I found out it was America. And then I found out I'm American. I'm like, I got my passport, I'm going back. So, it's exposure. It's really exposure to all the different facets of what's available in tech, And so when I came, I went to the military. In the military also, I found out I was a satellite communications engineer. I, was approached, one of the engineers there told me, hey, you should really look into going into engineering. And up until that point, because I didn't know any engineers, I really didn't know what the path would be. I happened to, I applied there was a scholarship for the U.S. Air Forces in Europe at that time. I applied, and I was the winner of that year. And I applied to one school, which was Syracuse University. And I came back to Syracuse and studied. But exposure is really important, because if you could see it, then you could be it, which is why also today, in terms of the content that we create, the same way that I was so deeply impacted by seeing, someone walk on the moon, and say, wow, this is what I want to do. I want to, have this feeling of knowing what exists beyond our world. And just, early on, I knew deeply, and I still believe now, that an education would be my key to the type of world that I wanted to be able to create. And education in tech, did exactly that, for me, because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to work for Boeing. I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do, a lot of what I've been able to do without, my education. When you look at my pictures growing up, it looks no different than a UNICEF commercial that you see, right? And so when I see those kids, I know that if we can expose everyone to to technology, which is why I'm so passionate about virtual reality, because you can put someone inside of this other world, and it starts and it gets them thinking about greater opportunity, and then creating those pathways. Because without those pathways, yes, you could dream, but without the support and the pathways, it becomes very difficult. My freshman year, most of the other kids in my class had been programming for a while. I was seeing a computer, I hadn't seen a computer that much. So it was all very new to me, and I was very embarrassed about not understanding the basics of coding and all of that, so I wanted to quit. But fortunately, when I went to talk to the Dean of Engineering, who's Dean Laurie Hunter, who's unfortunately passed, when I went to talk to her, she understood, that I wasn't quitting because, I wouldn't be a great engineer. I was quitting because I was embarrassed of not knowing what I didn't know. So, and then also I had like 3 jobs trying to, put myself through school, and they had created the Academic Excellence Workshop program, which could then allow me to do that, teaching other students, and then be able to pay for what I needed to pay for. So it wasn't just her being a mentor, but it was also her actually providing a pathway, saying, well, you don't have to, do 3 jobs. You can be an Academic Excellence Workshop facilitator, so you're making enough to make up for all these other things that you have to do. And then you could take that time to learn about the basics that you're missing. So being exposed to it, having the support system in place, and all of those things, are what we could do today to get more, women and girls into tech, to get more minorities into tech. Having all of those things in place really help. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You mentioned if you can see it, you can be it.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see it, you can be it.
Yes.
Where do you see your business being in 5 years?
Where I see my business being in 5 years is in every classroom, globally, because already we're working with the Department of Health for various countries that want to be able to use VR to teach. We're working with Baptist Health and so many medical institutions that are contacting us about using virtual reality as a teaching mechanism, and then also so I see my business being the global leader for virtual reality, entertainment, and education. But it doesn't really stop there, because the challenges that I've had, for example, raising capital, finding capital to fund my innovations. I have so many other great ideas that I want to be able to do, especially even in satellite communications. There are problems that I thought would have been solved by now. 20 years later, it still hasn't been solved, right? And, so I want to be able to then become that conduit for other people to fund their innovations. So as we build the technology, not only are we providing jobs for tens and thousands of people, but also to create the real ability for people to come in and get the same opportunities that their counterparts are getting, that they're not getting, to be able to fund their businesses. So I want to be able to do that. And that's the biggest thing that drives me. Mm-hmm.
So there's a saying that sometimes it's not about what you know, but about who you know. So how accurate do you think that is? And can you give some advice regarding networking?
Yeah, that's 1,000% accurate. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know, and that's not a bad thing, right? They also say that your network is your net worth, because to have the ability to be impactful, you have to, be able to effect change, right? And one, I say it's a mathematical perversity, because if you're a network of one, there's not, no matter what you multiply it by, you don't have a real multiplier. So the more people that that can really contribute to whatever your mission is, whatever your vision is, that are in all the right places to help you effect that change, that's where you get your multiplier. That's where you get your amplifier for what it is that you're going to do. So it's really important. And in today's world, I say that LinkedIn is my rich uncle. There's nobody that I cannot get introduced to or I can't reach out to using LinkedIn. And you'd be surprised, who will come back. I've reached out to so many people that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this person wrote back. It took a while, but I've had, some amazing people that have come back. So having the network is extremely important to effecting change.
Your last question. What are the most important skills you use in the real world?
What was the question?
What are the most important skills you use in the real world?
The most important skills. I think the most important skills are the ability to build that network. It's the ability to build that network, because it makes a difference in how you accelerate whatever you're doing. It makes that, and I think that's the relationships that you build and who you build those relationships with. That's going to make a difference in everything that you do. So the social currency today is just as big an asset as anything else. So. Mm-hmm.
So Mary,
It's on.
Oh, okay. Mary, thank you so much for your inspiring words. And I want to invite everyone to move to, is it that area right there? The area right out there where Mary will be doing a book signing for It's Not Rocket Science. The first 50 students get a free copy with an SUID. And please, if you haven't seen the output of Invent at SU yet, the students, I believe, are still standing out here in the hall. And I hope to see everybody tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in 369, our collaborative classroom in this building, at our Dean's Breakfast, where we'll have over 100 alumni joining us for breakfast. Students welcome also.
And if you do not have a book, you can buy the book right outside as well.
Oh, right. So, yeah, the bookstore is out in the lobby buying the book. So thank you, Mary. Let's give her a big hand.